The Chiko GroundFlex U2V solar panel ground mount is a massive new ground mount that recently became available at Signature Solar. It's made of galvanized steel and rated for wind speeds up to 130 miles an hour and snow loads of up to 60 pounds per square foot. It's big, it's expensive, and it's the beginning of a small solar farm that we're trying to build here at the lab. So welcome back to the lab where our opinions cannot be bought. Like anything DIY, this process was not all sunshine and rainbows. Honestly, it kind of felt a little bit doomed right from the moment that we took delivery of the package. But the team got this all set up and we've been running it at the lab for just about a month now, so we have had our fair share of time to fully understand what it's all about, our experience installing it, and find a couple things that we really don't like and some things that we do. As always, we'll leave some links to the product in the description down below, as well as any coupon codes we can get from Signature Solar to save you guys some money. But before we jump into everything we like and don't like about the Chiko ground mount, we're gonna start by showing you guys the install process.
But before we get into setting this guy up, something to note, we did receive this on a truck that had no access to a power forklift. So luckily we had a bunch of guys in the lab that day. Everyone kind of pitched in and we had to unload everything piece by piece. Now this isn't a light aluminum kit. Everything is heavy galvanized steel. So luckily we had some hands at play there. But if you were ordering the 30 panel kit or multiple kits for a much larger solar array, then keep in mind, maybe have some friends over that day, offer up some pizza, because this was not an easy task to unload alone. Or just make sure your delivery provider is going to have a way to get this all off the truck, because ours didn't, and it showed up and they just expected us to figure it out.
So we decided to install this along the very back of our yard. It'll feel a little bit less intrusive back here, and it also gives us some room in front of it to test some smaller mounts in the future. The install started by moving all the materials from the garage to the backyard, which sadly wasn't the first time we had to move all the raw materials. Once we had everything in the backyard though, we started measuring for the layout of the footings. The directions that came with the ground mount were extremely vague and provide ranges for lengths and widths because the panel stand can actually be adjusted depending on your needs. So after doing some math on the panels that we had, the width of our yard and our needs, we figured out what spacing we needed for our footings. When it came to the footings, we opted to use these screw-in footings. Our kit did come with the Chiko Trident ground piles, but we had a few concerns with those. The first one was that they had such a heavy galvanized coating on the poles that you could barely actually slide them through the bracket, and even if you did, once you had everything kind of set up, lining up those holes to fasten it would be extremely difficult. They just kind of felt like they were made cheaply or quickly. They're also a lot more work to get into the ground, which is good because it makes them permanent, but the other thing that we didn't really like about them was they were a lot more permanent than we wanted. If the lab outgrows our current space, we can easily remove these screw-in piles from the yard and move this entire mount with us wherever we go. And so once we had all four corners laid out and installed with our chalk line down, we started spinning and spinning and spinning. Once the footings were installed, we started cutting up some chunks of 4x4 that we could bolt into the top of each one, got everything bolted up, and then we started by lag bolting down the leg assemblies which came partially assembled. This is where we ran into our first problem. Once everything was bolted together on the ground, and a few of them were already fully assembled, we realized the diagram measurements weren't matching up to the measurements we had in front of us. On the diagram, there's actually two different pieces. One of them has an extra set of holes, but ours looked almost exactly the same. So we assumed that the two pieces we had were exactly the same, but you know what assuming does.
So we've run into an issue with angles and measurements based off the diagram. Looks like we should be 17.4 inches from the end of our beam to the first bolt, which we are. And then we've got the correct measurements on the angular bracing, but then when you go the distance from the first bolt up to the pivoting point of the next connection, we should be 37.4 inches, and way down the line we're almost beyond 4 feet. So we're having some troubles getting our angles right when everything seems to be wrong in their center bracing. Should be a hole right there, and we're nowhere near what the directions are telling us.
These pieces, though they look the same, were basically a couple of inches different, so we had to have them pretty much flipped in positioning almost on every single leg. In our opinion, they should at least mark these parts with a number like 1 and 2, or give us that extra set of holes so that it was a little bit easier to follow the actual diagrams. We ended up marking our own numbers 1 and 2 on them after we realized the initial problem, but just to save everyone the headache, labeling these would have been great. But after we got that sorted out, the progress started happening really quickly. Once we had everything straightened away, the rest of the challenges came from selecting the correct hardware for each point in the assembly process. The directions didn't really indicate which type of hardware you needed for the process, it just often showed a nut and a bolt. We had a ton of different nuts and bolts, but it didn't specify which ones went where, so there was a lot of trial and error to figure it out. As we got a little further into the build, it also became apparent that we were missing some of the hardware. We had to go to the hardware store at least 3 times for various nuts and bolts to finish the project. It seemed like a bunch of random hardware was thrown in the box with hopes that it would do the trick, but no one really double checked what was going out. But once we had all the hardware store trips completed and everything was bolted down, it was time to move on to our panels. We used the Sirius 415 watt bifacial panels. They're honestly kind of small for this application, but they've been one of our favorite panels lately, and so we just got a pallet of them from Signature Solar. This racking system uses the standard clips to mount them onto the racks. It was the simplest part of the install by far, and it just went super quick and super smoothly. You do need 2 guys to kind of help get that top tier of panels up and in there. We had Tiny Baby lend a tiny hand, although for the most part he just laid with the dog and posed for the camera. And that was pretty much that. We got all our wiring run and tucked nicely, and we now have a 10 kilowatt solar array in our yard. It actually could have been a little more if our yard was wider. We left out an entire footing on the left side, which would have housed a couple more panels on the top and bottom rows. But overall, it looks great, and it has been rocking at the house for just about a month now.
So look, we could definitely have put some bigger panels on this thing, okay? I don't want to hear it. It's honestly great because we're going to use this for a lot of solar panel testing. So while these 415s do look a little small on there, we can put some massive panels on here in the future to test for you guys. So don't make fun of the size of the panels. This is for testing purposes. But like I said, now that the team installed this thing just about a month ago, we're ready to share our thoughts on this ground mount, and we're going to start with the things that we like. First up, honestly, this thing just feels strong. Even the way we have it mounted on these screw-in legs, you look at it and you think this could be a little flimsy, but it's honestly solid. Like, we come out here and monkey around on this thing and it feels really good. It has a good amount of flex, so things won't just break or bend, but it's solid and we're not worried about the way that it feels at all. We can't say that for all the solar panel ground mounts that we've reviewed in the past, especially some Amazon ones. You can grab those things and just twist the metal. They've been sagging since the moment we put them in the yard. Like, they just instantly never held up. This thing feels like it's gonna be around for a long time. We also like that everything came pre-drilled and the legs, the bulk of it came pre-assembled. Obviously, we ran into our fair share of problems while installing this, but it's one of those things where even though we had those problems, looking at it now, if we were an installer, the next time it will go way smoother because we know exactly what we're doing, what we're looking for. And having even just those simple 2 legs come pre-installed saves you a whack ton of time. Overall, it was just very DIY friendly. There was no need to drill anything. It was basically just putting nuts and bolts in there and doing all the final touches. Nothing major had to happen. We also really like the scalability of this. I mean, sure, we got the big one, but you could get the small one, the 10 panel version, and you could easily add another 10 and another 10 in the future. You could add another 30 beside this if you had the room. The legs are able to be moved around. Like, the footings don't have to be exact depending on where you live and how much wind and snow load you're trying to get. You might want them closer together or further apart, or if you're just trying to fill a space, you kind of have a lot of leeway with how you can actually set it up, which allows you to kind of customize it a little bit more. And again, just expand it continuing on. Like, we could do this right across into the neighbor's yard if we wanted to. Like, basically in between each set of legs, you guys can see the little bracket that holds the 2 cross members together. We could have ended this at any point and then put the other half of the panel stand in front of it if we wanted to. It's just really cool how modular this is. And there was also a lot of solar panel mounting hardware, which we've run into issues with in the past. Even things like the Bright Mount from EG4, we didn't have enough T-brackets to actually mount 6 solar panels on there. We had to borrow T-brackets from another solar panel stand. With this, there was enough to riddle this thing with like 200 watt panels if we wanted. There was a ton of mounting hardware to mount panels onto here, which is huge. That's like the biggest annoyance when you get right to the end and then you don't have enough hardware. It's also funny because they didn't have to, because this stand is meant for like massive, massive panels. The 415 watt ones look tiny on here, but it's cool that they give you the option to run even smaller panels. And overall, like I said, it just feels kind of commercial. I get that we had problems with the install and we don't love when that happens, and we're not saying that that didn't happen. It's frustrating, but now that it's here and now that it's done, it feels commercial. It doesn't feel like something you would put at a cabin or something you would put, you know, in your backyard for your shed or a project. This feels like something that you put here and it will live here as long as you want it to. Like, it just, we're really happy with the solid feel of this thing overall. But it's not all perfect, and there is some things that we didn't like, starting with the fact that this didn't come with a grounding spike at all. There's a lot of panels on this thing. It would be cool if we didn't have to go buy a grounding spike additionally. You know, that's one of those things that would just be nice if they included it. They included a ton of other stuff. Grounding spike, little thing, start throwing it in. And the biggest thing that we didn't like was the instructions. They were just very poor. It's frustrating when you're looking at the instructions and the bolts you have in your hand aren't labeled on the instructions. It just shows a nut and a bolt, and you have to go through and count how many bolts you have and how many holes you have and where things are gonna go. Do those bolts make sense to go there? And then you find out you don't even have all the hardware. You have to go to the store, and so you're kind of just guessing a lot of the times. And even with things like the arms that went up and down, having 3 extra holes on the photo, but ours didn't have those 3 extra holes. We ended up installing them backwards. We had to switch them around. Little things like that. If you just put a tiny bit extra time into the instructions, it would have saved our team a lot of time putting this up in the yard. We just can't stress enough that when you're doing something like this, which is something that most people don't do often and probably won't do again soon, it would be nice if the experience was just a little bit more seamless. I know a lot of us don't rely on instructions all the time, but when you do something like this that you're not familiar with, you tend to rely on instructions, and not being able to was frustrating. We also don't like the chunky galvanized dip. They could have done a better job of galvanizing this stuff. It seemed quick or cheap or something. Like those Trident mounts that we didn't use, you don't want to have to spend time, especially considering those are additional to the $5,000 or $2,000. You have to pay extra for those ground mounts. Then you got to spend time cleaning up the galvanized dip just so that you can slide it in and then spin it so the holes line up. Too much work was going to have to go into that. We don't like that. I wish they just put a little bit of extra care into the galvanizing process. And lastly, the price. I know that I don't necessarily say we don't like the price, but if you're on a budget or you're trying to do something affordable, this is a relatively expensive system. The way I look at it is you could fit 4 400-watt solar panels on the Bright Mount. You could get 8 Bright Mounts, would hold as many panels as this, and you could do it for half the price. Now, obviously, it's going to be a lot lower to the ground. It's going to be a lot more work to install them. They're going to run horizontally, or you're going to have to raise the footings in the back. It's a whole thing. And those do feel a little more like project oriented, whereas this feels a little more long-term at a house or an industrial kind of vibe. I say industrial, but I just mean solid, like not like a project feel. This feels a lot more solid. I understand the price. It's also steel and it's galvanized, and there's a lot more that goes into this system. Personally, I find it a little expensive, and if it was just a little bit cheaper, I think people would flock to it. I know we don't really have the control over pricing of metal and tariffs and these days. I get it. I can't not say it. I wish it was just a tiny bit cheaper. And so look, at the end of the day, the team had a decent time putting this up. There was a couple of hiccups. That's to be expected with anything DIY. The hiccups definitely could have been avoided had the company provided better instructions and all the hardware that we needed. Now that it is up, the challenging part is over. We look at it, we swing off of it, we mess with it, and we think, you know what, this was worth the time and energy to put here. We're happy with it. We would recommend it to a friend, as long as they understand that unless they change the instructions or make sure that the packaging or whatever includes all the right hardware, there is gonna be a couple of hiccups. It's not perfect, but it wasn't bad enough that we absolutely despise the product. So the good news is, regardless, we now have a massive panel stand here in the yard that we can use to test panels for you guys and give you guys some honest feedback on new solar panels and make some videos. So make sure you guys check out the links in the description down below. We got information on this month's giveaway, and leave us a comment on some solar panels that you would like to see us test on this guy. That is all we got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out and stay charged.